Isolation. What do you know about isolation? Do you know anybody in your neighborhood, on your block, elsewhere, who is an older person, perhaps disabled, can't get out very readily and feels isolated, cut off from the world? Well, today we have Chad Cox with us. Chad is from Northwest Senior and Disability Services.
That's correct.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Lee.
And Chad's going to tell us a little bit about the senior peer mentoring program they do. But first, we're going to learn a little bit up front about Chad. And he grew up in Salem and Albany area in Lebanon. And tell us a little bit about your late grandparents and what the imprint they left in your life, Chad.
Well, as you say, I grew up in Albany on a family century farm. Mm-hmm. So actually both my grandparents, my grandfather, when he had the farm, ran it as a dairy. And we lived just about a half mile away from them. So I spent a lot of time with my grandfather and my grandmother on the farm and working the farm. And
did you milk cows and feed chickens or what?
No. So by the time I was younger, there were no more dairy cows on the farm. But
move over.
But there was plenty of work to be done.
What kind of work did you do then?
So I ran combines, baled hay, hauled hay.
Hey. Mm-hmm. So did that farm background give you a different outlook on life a little bit?
I think
as opposed to the urban.
It taught me the value of hard work.
Hard work.
Certainly.
You're still doing it and all.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I always admired my grandparents because they were such hard workers.
So aside from being hard workers, if there's one or two traits you could identify with grandma or grandpa on either side, what would those traits be that you saw invested in their lifestyle?
I think of both sets of my grandparents. My grandmother, my mom's side, was still living when I was young. And then my grandfather and grandmother on my dad's side really taught us to treat others with respect and with kindness. Those are the qualities that I think about when I think about both sets of my grandparents.
Wow.
They were active in their community. Of course, my other grandparents were active in the farming community. My grandmother had groups of folks she would bring out to the farm, and they would talk about gardening and agriculture. And my grandfather was heavily involved in agriculture in and around Ling County.
Well, now let's go back in a magic time machine to the days when you were in high school.
Yes.
What kind of activities did you pursue back then?
Gosh, when I wasn't busy kind of studying and getting ready for college, I was on swim team in high school. Yes, I was a swimmer.
Meet any mermaids?
No mermaids, but I did that through all 4 years of high school. So I was a long distance swimmer. I did the 500, so it's quite a long distance.
Do you still keep busy with swimming sometimes?
Occasionally, although I'm not as physically fit as I used to be when I was in high school.
Got to work on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about how you became interested in the social services, and how did that begin? Was it before Walla Walla College, or tell us about the stepping stones that got you from there to here?
Yeah, well, I started my academic career at Oregon State University, where I studied psychology. So I really think that's kind of the beginning of my interest in social work and working in geriatrics. Oregon State University, at the time I went to school there, and I believe they still do, had a program on gerontology. So you could, besides take your the courses for your major, you could complete a certificate in gerontology as kind of an integrated minor. And so because I had an interest in older adults at that time, that's what I did, is complete a certificate.
Interesting. I was raised in part by my grandparents in Brooklyn, New York, when they talk funny like that. And so when I got involved in gerontology, which is a scientific name for the study of aging, gracefully or otherwise, and so I'm repaying back at that to their generation and all. And what were the gerontology courses like, and do you remember any particular professor or course that you lean on that kind of was your foundation for where you are today?
So I guess my mentor, my advisor in that program was Dr. Claire Pratt. She was the program director, and I think in the late 80s
Thank you, Claire
early to
Pratt,
mid 90s.
wherever you are.
Yes. I think she's since retired now,
Okay,
but she really was the one that struck upon me the ability for me to go on and complete graduate studies. And really encouraged me to go into social work if I wanted to work in mental health with seniors. So,
well, Chad, there is a great need still with the baby boomers booming up to have more people involved in gerontology, aging field. So what would you tell people who are thinking maybe they want to get into that field? What kind of courses would they be taking in such a program?
Well, I think just as a general foundation, any social science degree. Nowadays, in Oregon, I think Western Oregon University is one. They have specific majors in gerontology, so you can actually earn your bachelor's degree in gerontology if you have an interest in doing that.
Western Oregon has a fabulous program in that area.
They do, yes.
Dr. Winningham and those people.
Yes.
Yes. Maybe he'll come on the show sometime, we'll see. He's been very busy lately and all. Of all the courses you took in gerontology, could you single out one that was really a deal maker for you that kind of gave you that extra enthusiasm?
Gosh, I can't really think of one in particular. I mean, there were a lot of different coursework that was required of that certificate.
Okay. Let's talk about psychology, and because that ties right in with the field we are now. What are some of the expected changes that people undergo when they become elderly and retire and all? And at the same time, what are some of the myths and misconceptions that people have about the older generation psychologically?
So I think one of the greatest myths that people have is that mental health issues like depression and anxiety are a normal part of aging. And that's not true. A lot of people in their older adult years go on to have very successful, productive, mentally healthy lives.
They do.
There's actually just a smaller proportion of the population of seniors that struggle with mental health issues. So actually here in Marion County, the last statistics that I was aware of in the last couple of years is there's approximately 11% of seniors in the Marion County area that struggle with, say, depression.
Okay. I want to put out a theory or postulate, whatever you want, fancy word is. And I don't think I've heard of any research that's really done it. I wonder to what degree the coping skills that you need to be a successful senior citizen are really honed, developed during your teenage years as you make the transition from being a teenager and a student to entering the workforce and becoming a parent and spouse. Do you know of any continuum study that shows how the forerunner of geriatric depression or anxiety, how it might have developed in early signs along the way?
Well, I do know that people that tend to suffer from depression and anxiety later in life have suffered from depression and anxiety lifelong. Many folks do. And that people's coping mechanisms are just something that they've learned over that course of their lifetime based on their experiences. So I think people generally don't learn those new coping skills at older age. It's something that the wisdom and experiences they've accumulated over a lifetime. So
it's shaped. So if I'm going to go back to something, so I remember there was a guy named John Locke with the tabula rasa, the blank slate. And so when you're born, it's sort of being a blank slate, and the frame of the slate of what your lifelong experiences will be is the genetic limitations of what your chromosomes are, but the inside part of the picture are the life experiences. That's the empirical or experience-related things and all. And I heard that when something is a significant experience embedded there, it can't really be totally erased. Maybe hypnosis could kind of deal with it a little bit, but all. And so the things of your past really come back to haunt you. And I'm going to share a whole new theory that I evolved. You could shoot it down if you want.
All right.
That life is like a kaleidoscope. And the kaleidoscope has all the different fragments in it of lifelong experiences. And as you turn the barrel of the kaleidoscope, that is time transpires, some things come from the front and go to the back, and some things come from the back and come to the front. You never know, in effect, which lifelong experience will resurface. And life is like that. Interesting little analogy.
That is an interesting analogy, yes.
Okay, play with it.
Oh. Well, I was just thinking, as you were talking about, how your past can influence the present. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the research has shown that, your ability to cope with things that life throws you is greatly determined by your experiences early on, and especially any trauma that you've experienced early on within, say, your family system.
Right. I have a dear friend who's sitting and watching us today on the sidelines there, who's been traumatized by growing up in the Philippines under the Japanese occupation and seeing bombs fly and bullets under the banyan tree in the backyard. And actually, she once escaped the house she was living in with only clothes on her back when it caught fire from a bomb. So those things still kind of percolate and could haunt you at sensitive moments in time.
They do, yes.
Mm-hmm. And I know of somebody who grew up in a very dangerous part of Portland, and there used to be a lot of drive-by shootings. And whenever he heard a car exhaust backfire, it made him think of a bullet flying by, and it kind of freaked him out. So, even the free association of the sound could come back to haunt you.
Yeah, I mean, I think those early experiences really kind of shape your life in terms of,
they do.
What choices you make, what paths that you travel down.
So, Chad, let's get into the meat of what you're doing now. It's called the Senior Peer Mentoring Program. Mm-hmm. It runs out of 3410 Cherry Avenue.
That's correct.
That's the Donenfeld building.
Yes. It's the address for Northwest Senior and people with disabilities.
Yeah, right near the Wildlife Building. But the seniors aren't as wild as the wildlife, hopefully. And it's right near the Salem Kaiser Senior Center there. Now, tell us a little bit how this program began and what it looks like today for you.
Well, I mean, the idea for the program really began in about 1977 with a model that was developed down in California by Evelyn Freeman. So she's the originator of what was called the Senior Peer Counseling model. She'd recognized that a lot of seniors experience life challenges later in life, and that it might be helpful to have people come and meet with them and talk with them about their problems and issues that they might be facing. This program that I coordinate now began in the late 80s as a senior peer counseling program. And just in the last couple years, we've actually transformed to a senior peer mentor program where we use more evidence-based practice to address depression and anxiety in the senior and younger disabled population.
Let's get a layman's definition of first of depression and then of anxiety, so that people don't go off making false assumptions on what depression is more than just feeling blue. Clinical depression is what? How would you define
it's
it?
really, feeling, deeply sad or depressed for more than a period of 2 weeks' time.
Unmotivated.
Unmotivated, impacting your ability to do the things that you enjoyed doing previously, impacting your relationship with others.
Sometimes feeling hopeless and helpless about the future.
Yes, exactly.
And thinking that nobody's there to rescue you, or even that you're worth being rescued.
Yeah.
And lower self-esteem comes into it a great deal, doesn't it?
It can. I mean, some people have shame about that, about feeling that way. And they become isolated from others, so they don't really have that, that social interaction that they had previous.
Withdrawn,
exactly.
So if they're ashamed, they're afraid to display themselves in public to other people because they think they'll be rejected, sort of?
Yeah, I think there's fears that they'll be judged for what they're experiencing. There's a lot of stigma still about mental health issues in society in general, and especially among, I think, the older adult population of folks.
Now, what could be done to reverse that trend in terms of relationships with the younger generation? Because usually you see the younger generation is full of pep and zest and raring to go. And we don't really, we segregate our population. There's a senior center, there's a youth club, very little, aside from your relatives visiting you, do you have intergenerational dialogue, talking with things. I know that at senior center sometimes they have a group of choral members, they come in, they perform, they clap, but there's no real communication other than the seniors being spectators, and that saddens me, really.
Yeah, I think there's things that both age groups can receive from each other, and not having that contact is a shame. I see more and more senior living situations where they'll actually have or encourage contact with younger individuals, preschool age children. I've known of several models of residential care where they'll have a daycare center on site.
Wilson House is one.
Yes, and they'll bring in kids to interact with the people living there. Those programs are great. We need more of those.
Okay, keep that in mind. This is for our next mayor, whoever it shall be. Something to work for, and for our governor to be.
Yes.
So, tell us a little bit, what does a senior peer mentor do?
So our program uses trained volunteers. They're 45 years or older. And they meet with individuals in their home setting, so they don't have to come to an office setting to receive these services. The peer mentor volunteer goes out to where the person lives. They meet with individuals that are struggling with depression or anxiety. And our program uses a series of self-help workbooks that the individual works within that are based off of cognitive behavioral therapy skills. And so the mentors meet in their home about once a week for about an hour.
Right.
And they go through the workbooks. They're there as their coach and their mentor through that process.
So having a weekly friend to kind of rev up the angels and give you hope that you still count on this planet, and you have good things going for you. And they meet them on their own terms to try to develop and reconnect them with their interests, and all saying, yes, I do. And how long is the mentor there for?
It averages around 10 weeks, but it can extend longer just based on the needs of the individual and how many of the workbooks they choose to work on.
Okay. Now we have May is Older Americans Month. I guess you all knew that, I didn't have to tell you, but just in case you didn't, every May. So that's an excellent opportunity for you, if you yourself or have some friends who are either semi-retired or retired, or if you'd like to do it a 1 day a week after work, to make your contribution to the senior community. Get in touch with Chad. What is your email or your website? What is it called?
So my name is Chad Cox, and my email address is chad.cox, C-O-X, at NWSDS.org. And we hold training sessions several times throughout the year.
Good.
The training consists of about a 2 to 3 hour orientation. Then we have 2 full days of training on the workbooks and aging issues and on mental health issues. We also require our volunteers to go through mental health first aid, and that's a day-long training also.
Good. I know somebody's doing that.
Yeah.
My friend Bill. Now, is the training given only during the daytime, or is it given in the evening if you're a working person over 45 but like to be a peer mentor?
So far, we've only held the trainings during daytime hours, 8 to 4, generally for those 2 full days of training.
Okay. So that rules out people who are full-time workers, I guess.
Yes, most of our individuals are retirees
Yeah.
or work maybe part-time.
Okay. And could you announce when the next training session takes place? Do you know offhand,
sometime in July. We haven't really set the date yet.
Okay, so be in touch with Chad.Cox at NWSDS.org.
SDS.org.
SDS.org.
or they can call me to ask any questions about volunteering at 503.
Get your yellow pad out.
304
304
3414.
3414. Easy to remember.
Yep.
3414. Now, tell us some of the typical issues or problems, keeping confidentiality, of course, of names. What are some of the more common issues that you tackle with the mentors going into someone's house? Let's say I'm a mentor. What kind of problems would I face?
Wide variety of issues that seniors face. Anywhere from health issues, maybe declining health and struggling with that. Death of a spouse. Sometimes, unfortunately, death of children.
So loss issues.
Loss issues, yes.
And loss and adjustment.
Yes, exactly. Maybe an individual, now has to move from their family home to a care facility, and they're having a difficult time adjusting to that move. There's a variety of different issues that
There's
people
actually
face.
a diagnosis called adjustment disorder in the diagnostic manual, and that might qualify them for things like that. I'd like to ask, just as a person who feels very strongly about this, to what degree can the mentor help the mentee, the older person, deal with becoming a better advocate for their own health care, so that they could feel not so weak, but so they can speak to their doctor, their specialist, and develop a list and get out front in finding out what's really bothering them and what are the different alternatives. Some of us tend to cringe when we face a doctor and feel intimidated and just rubber stamp whatever the doctor gives us from the big list of prescriptions, of which they may have a vested interest, but we won't go into that today.
Yeah, well, some of the workbook materials that we actually have available for people talk about that, about how to approach your primary care physician, about your mental health issue, what are good questions to ask, what you should bring to that visit or be prepared for to discuss with the primary care physician. Our mentors always encourage the person to kind of take control of their own life. We're not really there to
Micromanage you.
Micromanage, exactly. We're there to give the people the skills so that hopefully they can go on to live successfully when the mentor's not in the program with them any longer.
Let's talk a little bit about anxiety in the time we have remaining. Anxiety means sort of dealing with fearful experiences, being afraid to do things, being uptight, to use a teenage term.
Yeah, well, anxiety is kind of a whole spectrum, I think, of disorders. Anywhere from having a specific fear or phobia about something, or possibly having, fear from our past traumatic past experiences.
Or guilt.
Guilt.
Guilt's a big one. For example, if a surviving spouse felt that he or she didn't do enough to save or nurture the spouse who died, they may hold that guilt, and it really hobbles them and inhibits them, and their own self-image goes down the drain.
Yes, it
so
can.
You help that. So if you know of anybody in that category, come see Chad Cox on that, and maybe you could connect with a mentor or mentee and make it into a successful 8 or 10 week encounter. And it's free, right?
It's free. The program's free.
You don't have to go to a therapist. You just simply come and you enjoy what's new. And do you want to tell us a little bit about people who might want to refer somebody to the program, a relative or friend or neighbor? What kind of person are you looking for that would be appropriate?
Generally, our program is most appropriate for people that are experiencing mild to moderate levels of depression or anxiety. So it's not really meant to address people that are in, say, a mental health crisis.
No.
And because our program uses self-guided workbooks, it's really not appropriate for somebody who's, say, suffering from dementia and is not able to kind of negotiate the materials within the workbook themselves.
Okay. So these are minor setbacks, speed bumps in the road of your aging process, and things that would really be helpful to develop. I think the term mental health could be scary to some people. Just say everyday coping skills, a new term that I'm throwing into the vocabulary. ECSEX. Everyday coping skills. Coping is not as scary a word as mental health for a lot of people, because we all try to cope.
We all utilize coping skills in our daily lives. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, in the few minutes remaining, Chad, could you tell us, people who want to follow in your footsteps and get into this field and help the elderly people, what should they be doing to explore it, either as a professional or just as a volunteer type thing?
I guess I'm a little biased because I am a social worker. So I think that, if you have an interest in helping seniors and even looking at specializing in providing mental health services to seniors, social work is a good career choice. My program, it was a master's in social work program at Walla Walla University, so I'm giving a plug out to my university.
Yay.
But it had a clinical focus, which just meant that it had a concentration on mental health. And so if somebody had an interest in providing those services, an MSW is a good way to start.
Good, okay. I'm just going to give you and the audience, some preview. A number of us have been thinking about having the second social work school in the state being here in Salem. We thought that the North Campus of the Oregon State Hospital, which is now being vacated, would be an excellent site for it, because then some of the social work interns could do mental health across the street at the mental health hospital. You have 2 big prisons, penitentiaries in town for correctional workers. You have Mayor Peterson's homeless initiative, and you have a lot of retirement and nursing homes in town here that could certainly use some additional staff things, so it could be a win-win situation.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And the thing that I haven't mentioned, this is our real selling point, is that since you have a lot of state agencies like DHS and Corrections and others here, we would recommend that every single social work student take at least 1 public policy course, so that he or she can get the big picture, the microcosm of how policy is formulated, and not just a one-to-one client to consultant type thing. So food for thought. Any comments?
I think in general, we need more mental health professionals, especially for the older adult population. There's a general lack of mental health professionals for this population of folks, and so people go without services, and I think that's a shame.
Okay. So, any final closing remarks for Older Americans Month? Your wish, your dream, your fantasy?
Well, I would love to have people be interested in this program and to volunteer their time. We're always looking for more volunteers in the community, especially in those areas of Marion County that are a little more rural. So.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chad. And
thank you, Lee.
Before you age out, we want to say, wish you a happy audience. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.